So you've assessed your business, you've followed up with registering with the feds and maybe with the state. Now the next part, the big part, the payoff part. How do I find these projects? Typically, coming from my background and working with contractors and projects in the past, there are a number of independent programs out there, Dodge Reports, Bid Tracker, that list these projects coming up and gives you all the bid information, bid dates. But is there other ways a contractor looking for this work can access this work or the projects? Can you expand on that?
Tim, I'd happy to. There is a lot of ways to do that. There's no silver bullet, but it does require a little bit of work to make sure that you're finding what makes sense for you. So there's the obvious things. You can pay for somebody to help you do that. There are services out there. Deltek will gladly take your money and they will customize report of bid opportunities for you based on the information you provide them about your business and what you're interested in doing. That person that we talked about earlier that's now dedicated to making this part of their business, I would say this becomes part of or it is people in the business development office, and they will need to start to become familiar with what used to be Fed Biz Ops, which was a listing of all of the opportunities like I talked about before. It's now in SAM.gov, the System for Acquisition Management. And it is a question of what search parameters do I want to put in there to yield the population of results that might be opportunities I would be interested in. Just the Army, just the Navy, do I want to do all of DOD? So there are a lot of ways to tailor searches in those databases that allow you to see where those opportunities are. I would tell you that it becomes really important to understand the customer. How do you do that? Well, go to a conference. Those things are very useful. They have at individual bases, often a procurement day where the base leadership will invite, not just allow, but invite prospective vendors in and then talk about what their procurement priorities are for the coming year based on their mission needs or whatever it is. So that's an opportunity for you to get smarter about what your potential customer needs. You need to start to understand their language. The DoD, that's the world I come from, a lot of times they talk in acronyms. Well, if you don't understand their acronyms, it's going to be hard for you to put together a proposal.
You're going to go back and look up acronyms for a day and a half.
So you really do have to learn to become conversant in the work that they're doing, because that's their world. If you want to play in it, you go familiar with it. So there are a variety of places and ways to do that. The Dynamic Small Business Search, DSBS, is another database that you can use that allows you to go and search these things and find them. Trade magazines. There are a lot of those kinds of things that the DoD, that the federal government has, that will say, these are events, these are opportunities. Following what's going on in the marketplace helps you become much more cognizant of how an opportunity is shaped, and how, when we get to the next section talking about contracts, you would want to structure your proposal, because you've now understood what it is their pain point is, and you have a unique solution that will help cost effectively address the pain that they are putting out the solicitation for in the first place.
Fed distributes these billions of dollars around the state. Does the Fed put stipulations on whether there needs to be community involvement, or do they kind of leave that to the
I
state?
think they leave that largely to the state, but there are requirements that they will probably start to levy with the strings that come with those appropriations. So corrosion's an issue, right?
Yeah, it's a big issue for us.
Big issue for us. We see bridges collapse, and we don't want to see bridges collapse. While I haven't seen the exact appropriation language, I got to believe that they're going to want to make sure that the construction of that new bridge is done with the best corrosion planning techniques and technology that can be put in there. So I'm pretty sure that you'll find that the states are cognizant of that and will be following along appropriately.
Kind of wrapping up this portion, is there anything else that you think is pertinent to add to working with GSA, anything like that?
Well, sure. People will be familiar with having a GSA schedule. And a lot of times the knee-jerk advice is you should have a GSA schedule.
And GSA schedules are on the Fed and state side, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not always convinced that having a GSA schedule is a good thing. It takes time and money to submit yourself for approval of a GSA schedule. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get work. The GSA schedule is a pre-approved list of services or goods at specific prices that you've agreed that you will provide for those prices. But you still have to go out and find the work. And in some instances, going back to the early part of our conversation and doing the market research and assessing your business, it might not make sense to have a GSA schedule, and all that effort that you put into putting one together doesn't necessarily provide you benefit in the end. So I would caution about anybody that says you have to have a GSA schedule. There are benefits, but it's not necessarily for everyone. The federal acquisition regulation is often viewed as this onerous, horrible set of guidance that makes procurement just a royal pain. I don't subscribe to that belief. I think that if you're a good contracting officer, the federal procurement acquisition regulation, the FAR, and its supplements and those rules provide you an enormous amount of flexibility to procure the goods and services that you want. There are, as we talked about earlier, set-asides to small businesses, women-owned, the service-disabled veteran-owned. There are opportunities to go to Native American businesses without having to solicit competition. There are a huge variety of types of contracts: firm fixed price, cost plus award fee. All of that flexibility is designed to use the right type of contract for a particular procurement. It makes sense to have that flexibility, because if you don't, and you're using a firm fixed price contract and you're trying to develop a new technology that doesn't exist, how in the world do you ever price that? It just doesn't make any sense. There's too many unknowns. So the whole reason that type of contract exists is to give flexibility to allow those unknowns to be determined, and that process is established so that everybody succeeds. The government gets what it wants, and the technology is development, and the contractor is not driven into bankruptcy because they didn't know how to price it. If you're going to blast and paint a bridge, you can go and do a site survey, and you can look at the bridge, And then you start to work on it and you find some underlying conditions you weren't aware of,
Oh, yeah.
right? Well, how does that work? If you've chosen the right contract
Gotcha.
type, the interests of both the government and the contractor are protected because if you've got a firm fixed price contract and that's the price, and you're stuck.
Yes.
No,
that's a great example.
Right. But there are some, and I don't want anybody watching this to think, oh, geez, I don't want to do that, because there are remedies in the Federal Acquisition Regulation to address that. So you can request an equitable adjustment, even if that was the type of contract. There are ways and means to fix that, but it's better to have that done at the onset rather than
No, absolutely.
right. Then
you'll cover your ass.
Exactly. You don't want to,
for lack of better French,
dig in a hole and say we didn't know this was solid granite, 6 inches below the earth, or whatever it is. So you definitely want to make sure that the type of contract you select matches the type of work being done.